All right, so for now, we're going to be completing our discussion of the muscle contraction. Remember, a muscle contraction is a shortening of the length of the muscle. And remember how the shortening of the length of the muscle takes place. It takes place by allowing the thin filaments formed of actin subunits to slide along the length of the thick filaments, which are mainly formed of the myosin subunits. When you are sliding those thin filaments along the length of the thick filaments, you are going to be shortening the length of the contractile unit of a skeletal muscle cell. This is my sarcomere. Sarcomere is the distance between the Z discs which are attaching the thin filaments together. Shortening in the length of the sarcomere results in shortening of the length of the whole muscle fiber, because each muscle fiber is formed of sarcomeres that are lying adjacent to one another. So if I'm shortening the length of each one of them, this is going to result in shortening in the length of the whole muscle fiber. And if you shorten the muscle fibers in a muscle, this results in shortening of the length of the whole muscle, allowing the contraction to take place. So in a relaxed muscle, this is a relaxed muscle, and this is going to be a contracted muscle. So what happened here in a contracted muscle, you are reducing the length of the muscle, and this will allow you to pull one point towards the other, pull either the insertion or the origin towards the other point. This is briefly what we've discussed last time. Today we are looking at the two different types of contractions. So if I am able to create a muscle tension on here in this muscle, and the maximal force that can be created by this muscle allows me to pull 10 pounds, let's say. This is the maximum load I can pull by the muscle, 10 pounds. So if I give this muscle something smaller than 10 pounds, so this is a relaxed muscle like this. Let's say I'm trying to carry with this muscle, which maximum load that it can carry is 10 pounds. Now I give it just 9 pounds. Would I be able to move the load? What do you think? Contracting this muscle, will it be able to move the load? So if I am able to move the load, I'm able to move the load, yes. So this is lower than the maximum load I can hold. What happens inside the muscle? The muscle length shortens. So the distance between the 2 points on here is going to be reduced between the origin and the insertion. So I have shortening in the length. And another thing that's going to be taking place is that you won't be in need to reach the maximal tension in your muscle, because you will be able to move the load at a lower tension compared to the maximal tension, because the maximal tension allows you to move, again, 10 pounds, not only 9 pounds. So you don't need to reach the maximal force of contraction in order for you to move the load. So if I'm drawing here the graph showing the relationship between the tension and the length of the muscle. So what happens in here? The tension in the muscle is gonna be increasing, increasing, increasing until when? Until I reach enough tension to move this load. Let's say those 9 pounds. So once I reach the enough tension to move the load, what will I do? I don't have any further increase in tension. I don't need to perform a maximal contraction every time I use the muscle. So I will reach, let's say this amount of tension on here. So in our example, it's 9. In this example is 3 kilograms. So once I reach this level of tension, the tension will become stable. So there will be no further increase in tension, and the tension will remain constant. During this time, when I have the constant tension in the muscle, what's gonna be happening in the length of the muscle? In order to create this tension, remember, you're gonna be shortening the length of the muscle. So the length of the muscle is gonna be reduced. So if, let's say, the length of the muscle is 100 centimeters. So when I contract, I start to increase the tension until I reach tension high enough to move the load. After that, the tension is going to become constant. There will be no further increase in the tension. And at the same time, the muscle length is going to be shortening, have shortening of the length of the muscle. So the muscle will be dropping from 100% of its length to 70% or 75% of its length. And then you do what? You're going to be relaxing. So the tension is going to be reduced back to your muscle tone. And when you are relaxing, when you are reducing the tension in the muscle, what's going to be happening in the length of the muscle to the length of the muscle? The length of the muscle is going to be increased back to 100% of the length. So again, if I'm contracting the muscle, what's going to be happening here? First thing, I'm increasing the tension. Myosin are pulling the actin. I am trying to create enough tension to move the load. So I created a tension that allows me now to move 9 pounds. What happens to the length of the muscle when you reach enough tension to move the load? The length of the muscle at this point is going to be going down. It's going to be reduced. This is the length of the muscle. What's going to be happening after that to the tension? Tension going to be remaining constant. It's going to remain the same. I don't need to increase the tension of the muscle to reach 10 pounds, for example. Once I reach enough tension in the muscle that allows me to move the load, the tension of the muscle gonna remain constant. Shortening in the length will stop once you are relaxing the muscle. So when I relax the muscle, what's gonna happen to the tension? The tension will be dropping down. At the same time, the length of the muscle is gonna be increasing back to normal, to 100% of the length of the muscle. So let's say this is 100% of the length of the muscle. This is 70% of the length of the muscle. So it required me to shorten the length of the muscle by 30% in order for me to move this load. Is this concept clear, or anybody is confused here? Anybody is confused here? All right, so again, what we are discussing right now. We're discussing the different types of muscle contraction. Again, here in this example of muscle contraction, I was capable to move the load. So the load is lower than my maximum tension. The load I have is lower than my maximal tension. So nothing, no problem with me so far. So what if my muscle can hold? So before we move on, what do we call this type of contraction? You see on here, I did have a constant tension. So there will be no further increase in the tension once I reach enough tension in the muscles that allows me to move the load. So we're gonna call this is an isotonic contraction. What I mean by iso it's constant, and tonic means tension. So if I have constant tension in the muscle, it's an isotonic contraction. So why did I call it again isotonic contraction? Because once you reach enough tension in the muscle that allows you to move the load, the tension gonna remain constant. There will be no increase in the degree of tension to reach the maximal force of contraction. Let's see another type of contraction here. Again, my muscle can move 10 pounds. What if I'm trying, let's say, to move my car? So to carry the car by my hands up in the air. I'm able to move 10 pounds, but the car weight is 1,000. If you are trying to move the car up in the air by your hands, carry the car, would you be able to do so? Would I be able to, with one hand, move the car up in the air? No, right? So if I'm trying to do so, I'm not convinced, and I'm trying to do so. So would there be any contraction in my muscles? Would I have a muscle contraction? Will my muscle contract? If you are trying to push the wall in your house, would you be able to push the wall? Will it move? No, there will be no movement. But is there any increase in that tension? Is there any contraction taking place in your muscles, even if you're not able to move the load? Yes, 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 there is. Any other people? Yes, there will be a contraction. So this means what for you? This means that there will be an increase in the degree of tension in the muscle. Until when? Until you reach the maximum contractions that you can perform. So you're going to reach 10 pounds. Am I able to move the load? Am I able to move the load? I'm not able to move the load. So will there be any shortening in the length of the muscle? Is there any shortening in the length of the muscle? If I'm trying to move those 1,000 pounds up, will my muscle shorten? Would I have a reduction in the length of the muscle? No. No shortening in the length of the muscle because simply you failed to move this load. The load is too heavy, so there will be no shortening in the length of the muscle. Did you have a contraction? Yes, I've had a contraction, but this contraction did not create enough tension that allows me to move the load. Is there any movement for this load if you fail to do so? No movement of the load. So this results in what? This results in maintaining the length of the muscle the same. There will be no change in the length of the muscle if you didn't move the load. So here in this type of contraction, we call this type of contraction, it's an isometric. Iso again means constant, and meter means meter is length. So I have a constant length of my muscle. The load is greater than the tension developed by the muscle, and as a result, there will be no shortening in the length of the muscle. The length of the muscle gonna remain constant. That's why we call this type of contraction, it's an isometric contraction. So again, two types of muscle contractions that we've got. We've got an isotonic contraction. You're gonna reach the tension needed for you to perform, to move the load. After that, the tension gonna remain constant. For the isometric contraction, you're gonna be reaching the maximal tensions that you can create by the muscle, but because the load is too heavy, you won't be able to carry the load. So there will be no shortening in the length of the muscle. So we call this is again isometric contraction compared to the one that allows me to move the load. This is an isotonic contraction. Any difficulty? Any difficulty? Questions? Questions? All right, so if I'm contracting my muscles, where do I get the energy needed for the muscle to contract? Again, why do you need energy in the muscle? Remember, in order for the myosin to form the cross bridge, it needs an ATP to be attached and hydrolyzed for it to bind to the actin subunits. Also, this ATP is going to be needed for you to detach. Another ATP going to be required for the myosin head to detach from the binding site on the actin subunit, either for you to relax or for you to keep contract, increasing the tension of the muscle. So you're going to need an ATP to contract, to bind, and another ATP to detach the myosin head from the binding site of the actin subunit. So I need a huge amount of energy. I need a lot of ATP here for the muscle to contract. So what are the sources for the energy here in my muscle? First source for the energy in my skeletal muscles will be stored ATP. So I have ATP present inside the muscle cells, ready to be used to allow the muscle contraction. But this stored ATP will not last for long. This stored ATP is going to be depleted. It's a very small amount of energy. The second line, the second source for you to get the energy required for you to allow the contraction to take place will be creatine phosphate. Creatine phosphate is a mediator that allows you to regenerate broken ATP. So I would be carrying the phosphate for it to bind to an ADP, an adenosine diphosphate, for me to produce an ATP, to regenerate the ATPs that were depleted. But again, this is going to be playing a role for the very first few seconds. So only ATP and creatine phosphate will allow you to contract the muscle for a few seconds. You're going to need to keep going more energy. So what is another source for energy is going to be the glucose. This is why you're eating, to get the glucose that you're going to be breaking down to generate the energy, to generate ATP. This glucose might be broken down in the presence of oxygen or without oxygen. So who will decide whether you're going to be breaking down the glucose without oxygen or with oxygen? It's according to the intensity of the workout. So if I'm running a sprint, my heart and lungs won't be capable to supply enough oxygen for my muscles. So the muscles will decide we need to perform a much faster contraction beyond the capacity of the heart and lungs to deliver enough oxygen. So what's going to happen in here? The muscle will decide to break down the glucose without oxygen. This is what we call an anaerobic glycolysis. From its name, an means without, aerobic means without air. And what I mean by air here, we mean oxygen. So this is a glycolysis, glycoglucose, and lysis. And lysis means breakdown. So what am I doing here? I am breaking down the glucose without oxygen. We call this process is my anaerobic glycolysis. The anaerobic glycolysis is going to allow you to generate 2 ATPs that will be produced per each glucose. But the problem here is that when you break down the glucose without oxygen, here I'm breaking down the glucose without oxygen, this results in accumulation of pyruvate or pyruvic acid. This pyruvate is chemically unstable, so it needs to be transformed into a more stable chemical form, which is going to be my lactic acid. So when you go to the gym, it has been a while that you didn't go to the gym and you did decide to go today, and you start running, what's gonna happen? You're gonna go back home and you have this burning sensation of your muscles. Why do I have this burning sensation in the muscle? Because you are generating lactic acid. You are breaking down the glucose without oxygen. As you have been sitting without any kind of activity for a long time. So now the capacity of the heart and lungs is going to be diminished, and you can't supply enough oxygen to your muscles. And if you can't supply enough oxygen to the muscles, your muscles will decide to break down the glucose without oxygen, and this results in the accumulation of lactic acid. This is one of the two main reasons why we get muscle fatigue. So is there anything good about this process? Yes, it supplies ATP in a very fast way. It's fast, but can't last for long. So for how long can you run a sprint for? Anybody still here? 30 seconds? 30 seconds? Yeah, around 1 minute, around 60 seconds. You can run a sprint around 60 seconds. You're gonna be breaking down the stored ATP, which will last a few seconds, and then creatine phosphate will last another few seconds, and the glucose without oxygen, it will cause muscle fatigue, accumulating lactic acid within 30 to 40 seconds. So altogether, all in all, you can run a sprint for 1 minute, around 1 minute. Why you can't run a sprint for more than this? Because simply you are accumulating what in your muscles? You're accumulating lactic acid. Lactic acid, which is going to be an acid. Acid is an irritant. But for how long can you run a marathon? For Nico, we're going to answer this question in a few minutes. Why we don't have muscle fatigue if we are regularly exercising? This is a question that we're going to answer in few minutes. My question now is how long can you run a marathon for? You can run a marathon for hours, right? I can run a marathon for hours without having this muscle fatigue. Why? Because simply I will be breaking down the glucose this time in the presence of oxygen. So if you've got oxygen delivered to your muscles will start to break down the glucose while the oxygen is present, and this is going to result in formation of H2O, carbon dioxide, and 32 ATP. Do you have a problem with water? Was the water going to cause irritation to your muscle tissue, like lactic acid? What do you think? Is water going to be harming my muscle cells, causing irritation to the muscle cells? No. So water won't cause a problem. How about the carbon dioxide? Carbon dioxide, will it cause a problem like the lactic acid? You're going to be breathing out the carbon dioxide. You're going to be breathing faster. So all the accumulated carbon dioxide, you're going to get rid of it just during the respiration. So carbon dioxide is not going to be a problem. Water is not going to be a problem. And the very good thing here is that you're going to have a lot of energy. Again, how many ATPs were produced per glucose molecule in an anaerobic condition without, if I did break down the glucose without oxygen, how many ATPs am I producing? I'm producing 2 ATPs. How many ATPs would I be producing if I break down the glucose in the presence of oxygen? I did have enough time to supply the muscles with oxygen. I would be producing 32 ATPs. Actually, it's 32 to 36 ATP gonna be produced per glucose. 32 to 36 ATPs gonna be produced per glucose. All right, would I have a muscle fatigue in this situation? Would I have muscle fatigue in this condition if I am running a marathon? If I'm running a marathon, would I have muscle fatigue? Like if I ran a sprint? What do you think? No, no. Why? Because what causes muscle fatigue is depletion of ATP. I don't have enough ATP production. The one thing. The other thing is the accumulation of lactic acid. So why this won't happen in this condition if you're breaking down the glucose in the presence of oxygen? Simply because you are producing a lot of energy, a lot of ATP. And you're not producing lactic acid like an anaerobic glycolysis. So it's much less likely to develop muscle fatigue if you are performing a low intensity exercise. Like running a marathon. All right. Another name for the low intensity exercise, we call it an aerobic exercise. So if I decided to run a sprint, remember, you find the alligator coming closer to you from last class, so you started to run. You're running a sprint, right? It's not a marathon. So this sprint, when I'm done running the sprint for 40, 60 seconds, would I be breathing faster or slower? What do you think? Compared to if I'm running a marathon. Faster, right? Why faster? Why would I be breathing? I have to restore all my stores. So I did have stores of glucose. If you remember, glucose in your muscles is going to be stored in the form of glycogen. So you need to rebuild this glycogen from the glucose. You need also to transform the lactic acid into pyruvate back into glucose. And then this glucose, you need to transform it into stored glycogen another time. you did consume ATPs, you need to form other ATPs to substitute to maintain the same reserve of ATP. You need to reform the creatine phosphate that was kept in your cells. All this is going to be requiring oxygen. So the extra oxygen that you're going to need after exercise is what we call the oxygen deficit. So let me ask you a question here. Like, oxygen deficit is like spending using a credit card. So if you have a credit card and you're spending money from this credit card, is the money that you're spending right now is yours? You're using your credit card, you're spending money through the credit card, and is this money yours? No, it's not mine. This is a money that belongs to the bank or whatever institute that did issue this card. So this is not my money. So what I will need to do at the end, I need to repay it back. This is the money that I'm borrowing, I'm consuming this money, and I need to, at the end, after, for example, so I did have a car issue, so I did have to spend more money from my credit card to fix my car. So what will I need to do after that? I need to repay this credit card company. This is the same concept when you are performing a high intensity exercise. You are consuming energy which you are not currently producing. The amount of energy that you did consume, it's not produced at the moment. It's from your reserves. So the reserve here is like the bank. Your muscle reserve is like a bank. It has ATP that you can break down. It has creatine phosphate. It has glycogen. So you're going to be consuming all this during exercise. In order to pay it back, you're going to need to breathe faster. So for you to get extra oxygen, for you to restore everything back to normal. It's like spending money from the credit card, so I would need to work for longer hours next month for me to be able to repay this credit card. So those extra hours on here that you're going to be working, it's your oxygen deficit. The extra oxygen that you're getting at the end of the exercise for you to restore all the reserves that you've consumed during exercise. You're converting lactic acid back to pyruvic acid, into glucose, and then into glycogen. You have consumed energy that you are not currently producing. You are consuming reserves. Is this point clear? Clear? Oxygen deficit. All right, so muscle consumes a huge amounts of energy, which required us to break down ATP, consume creatine phosphate, break down glucose without or with oxygen. to produce this ATP. So what the muscle will be doing with this ATP that it got from everything that we've mentioned, this stored energy in the form of ATP is going to be transformed into mechanical energy. What I mean by mechanical energy is the movement that you're going to be performing. But the mechanical energy that you are going to be performing, or the contraction itself, is only going to be representing 40% of the energy consumed. Only 40% is going to be the mechanical movement, the contraction. So what did you do with the rest of the ATP? So let's say I did consume 100 ATPs or 100 calories. And I did measure the work that I did perform, the mechanical movement itself. And I figured out that the mechanical movement I did perform is worth only 40 calories, not 100 calories. So if you are running on a treadmill and it tells you you did burn 100 calories, this means what? This means that you did produce a movement worth only 40 calories. What happens to the remaining 60 calories that you did consume, that you did break down? They are not transformed into mechanical work, they are not transformed into a movement, but they are transformed into heat. This mechanical work is only representing 40% of the consumed energy, compared to the heat that you are producing is going to be representing 60% of the consumed energy. And this explains why you're going to be sweating heavily when you exercise. So when you exercise, why are you sweating? Because 60% of the energy that you are you are breaking down is going to be transformed into heat, which will increase your body temperature. So how would you respond to an increase in the body temperature? You try to reduce it back to normal. And remember, you're going to be in need to sweat in order for you to reduce it back to normal. So this profuse sweating that takes place during exercise is simply a way by which you're going to be maintaining a normal body temperature. But why in the first place did I have this increase in the body temperature? Because simply 60% of the energy that I will be consuming is going to be transformed into heat, and only 40% is going to be a mechanical work. Right, clear. Questions? All right. So we're looking here at the force of the muscle contraction. What are the factors that will be affecting the force of contraction? If you remember last class, we did discuss two of them. First one that we've discussed was the frequency of stimulation. Remember? If I got one stimulus, my muscle responds by performing contraction followed by relaxation, muscle twitch. But what if I get faster stimulation before I complete the relaxation of the muscle? So during mid relaxation here. Before I complete the relaxation, I receive another stimulus. What's going to happen? The next contraction is going to be stronger. So if you received another stimulus before you complete the relaxation, the next contraction is going to be stronger. If you remember why this happens, if you didn't complete the relaxation phase and you've received another stimulus to your muscle, the next contraction is going to be much stronger than the previous one. Why this happens? You remember from our discussion last class. Calcium, exactly. Remember, if you are releasing in response to each of the stimulation, you're going to be releasing 5 calcium, not performing a complete relaxation of the muscles. This means that you still have some of those calcium outside in the cytoplasm. So whenever I receive another stimulus, this is going to cause the release of another 5. So rather than having only 5 outside in the cytoplasm, now I have 2 from the previous contraction and 5 got released due to the second stimulus. So now I have an increase in the number of the available calcium in the cytoplasm. This increases the force of the muscle contraction. All right. Another factors that we discussed last time also was the strength of the stimulus. If you remember, the stronger the stimulation, the more muscle fibers that will become activated. So if I am receiving a threshold stimulus, a minimal number of muscle fibers will be recruited. Compared to a stronger stimulus, much more muscle fibers gonna be recruited, and as a result, what's gonna happen? You're gonna have a stronger muscle contraction. So again, what will be determining the number of muscle fibers that you get activated is gonna be the strength of the stimulus. A third factor that we discussed last time was the size of the muscle fiber. If I have a small size of the fiber, small muscle fiber, I will be performing weaker contraction compared to a medium-sized muscle fiber compared to a large-sized muscle fiber. So the larger muscle fiber, the stronger the contraction. So again, we discussed frequency, we discussed the size of the muscle fiber, we've discussed the number of activated muscle fibers, which gonna be determined according to the strength of the stimulus. Another factor that will be affecting the force of muscle contraction will be the degree of stretch applied to the muscle. So try to imagine you have an elastic band. This is representing your muscle. If I did stretch the band like this, compared to A here, this is the degree of stretch of the same elastic band. And B, I did have much more stretch applied to the elastic band. So which one gonna have a stronger recoil force? Which one recoils in a stronger way? B, right? Why B? Because simply, the more you stretch any elastic thing, the stronger it will recoil. And this will be applied to the muscle. So if I'm starting here at a more stretched length of the muscle, this muscle is going to be performing a stronger contraction compared to this muscle. So the more you stretch the muscle, the stronger it contracts. More stretch, stronger contraction. Another thing that I have in here is going to be the velocity and the duration of the contraction. What I mean by velocity of a contraction, how fast am I able to perform the contraction? And the duration of the contraction is for how long can you perform this contraction? So again, here we're not looking at the force of contraction, we're looking at how fast can you contract and for how long can you contract. So what are the factors here that will be affecting how fast and long the muscle will be contracting? First is going to be the muscle fiber type, the type of the muscle fiber. We have two types of muscle fibers. I have a muscle fiber that is going to be fast glycolytic muscle fiber. So from its name, it's going to be fast, but the problem here is that it's going to be fatigable. So like your fingers, can you flex, extend your finger faster? Or can you bend, can you flex and extend your spine faster? Which one is going to be faster? Flexion, extension of your finger, or flexion or an extension of your spine? Which one going to be faster? Fingers. So if you flex your finger and extend your finger, it's going to be much faster than flexion and extension of your spine, of your back. But for how long can you do this? For how long can you keep your finger flexed? Can you do it all day long? Can you flex, extend your finger all day long? Yes or no? Flex, extend, flex, all day long. It's fast. Can you do it all day long? What do you think? No. You get tired, right? The muscles will get tired. So they are fatigable. Why they are fatigable? Because simply they are glycolytic. Remember, two ways by which we did break down the glucose. We did break down the glucose either in the presence of oxygen or without oxygen. Here, which one was faster? Which one was the ones that you're gonna be using to generate energy in a sprint with oxygen or without oxygen. Which one gonna be faster to generate the energy? Without oxygen, right? Anaerobic. So this is why this muscle is gonna be contracting faster. Those muscle fibers are the one, this muscle fiber is gonna be the one that's gonna be contracting faster. I need to reconnect my tablet on here. All right, so again, if I am breaking down the glucose without oxygen, I will be much faster. But in the same time, what am I producing? I am producing pyruvate that will be transformed into lactic acid. And I'm not producing much ATP, I'm producing only 2 ATP. So having lactic acid, having small amounts of energy that will get produced, yes, I have a faster contraction, but I can't contract for long. I have a short duration of the contraction. I am faster, but I have short duration of the contraction because the muscle gets fatigued. It has small amounts of energy. It's accumulating lactic acid. Those are the two main reasons for muscle fatigue. The other type of my muscle fibers is gonna be formed of, is gonna have slow oxidative muscle fibers. So those are slow oxidative muscle fibers. So if I have a lot of those slow oxidative muscle fibers, would I have a fast or a slow muscle contraction? First, let's see here. They are breaking down the glucose mainly in the presence of oxygen. So in the presence of oxygen, I will be producing CO2, H2O, and a lot of ATP. A lot of ATP. Breaking down the glucose in the presence of oxygen, remember, it's a slow process. It's a slow process, exactly. I am much slower. So you flex, extend your spine, it's much slower than your finger. So the predominant muscle fibers in your back muscles is going to be slow oxidative muscle fibers. They are much slower, but they are less fatigable. They are fatigue resistant. Why they are less fatigued? Why they are less fatigued? Again, what causes the muscle fatigue? To have low energy. Do I have low energy in this case? Low energy production? No, I am producing a lot of ATP. What is the other reason for muscle fatigue? Will be the accumulation of lactic acid. And do I accumulate lactic acid in here? Is there any production of lactic acid if I am breaking down the glucose in the presence of oxygen? No, you're not producing lactic acid. You are breaking down the glucose, you're forming carbon dioxide and water, which are not going to cause muscle fatigue. So I am a fatigue resistant type of muscle fibers. Yes, I have slower contraction, but I can contract for longer duration. Like right now, for how long do you contract your back muscles? For how long do you contract your back muscles? They are contracted all day long, just to maintain your posture all the time. All the time they are contracted. Yes, they are much slower, but they are fatigue resistant. They have predominant slow oxidative muscle fibers. The other factors that affect uh, the speed and the duration of the muscle contraction will be the load itself. So if you are contracting your biceps, flexing your forearm, moving a pencil, would you be able to move faster or slower compared to if you are flexing your forearm, rather than holding a pencil, holding your textbook, let's say? So moving your pencil is going to be much faster. And would you be able to flex, extend, holding the pencil for longer than the textbook, or longer if you are holding the textbook? So you're going to be moving, if you are holding a light load, you're going to be moving faster and for a longer duration. So the muscle contraction here is going to be affected by the load. If you are dealing with a light load, like a pencil, the contraction of the muscle is going to be much faster and it's going to be for a longer duration, compared to if you are moving a heavier load, like your textbook, for example, you're going to be much slower and you can contract the muscle for a shorter period of time. So if you see on here, the relationship between the velocity of the contraction and the load. So as you increase the load, the heavier the load, the slower the muscle contraction. So you see on here, the heavier the load, the more the load is going to be heavier, the slower the muscle will be contracting. The other factors that affects the speed and duration of the contraction is going to be recruitment. Remember, we did mention that the more muscle fibers that will be recruited, the stronger the muscle contraction, right? But here we're not talking about the strength of the contraction. Here we're talking about the velocity and the duration of the contraction. So I usually think of the recruitment as having a cart and you have horses to pull this cart. Let's say you have 10 horses pulling this cart and you have 8 horses pulling a similar cart. A similar cart is pulled by 8 horses. Which one will arrive first? The cart pulled by 10 horses, A, or the one pulled by 8 horses? Which one is gonna arrive first? Which one is gonna be faster? The one that has more horses pulling, right? So more muscle fibers are carrying on the contraction. This allows the muscle to contract, not only perform a stronger contraction, but also have a faster contraction, increasing the velocity of the contraction. So here, those 10 horses are gonna be pulling the cart much faster than those 8 horses. How about if you have a very far destination? Which one will most likely keep running for a longer duration? So you're gonna have a destination on here. You can arrive in 3 days, let's say. Which ones will keep running for a longer duration? Let's say for 20 hours without stop. What do you think? Again, my question, which one, if you have a very far destination, those two carts are going to be pulled, one by 10 horses, one by 8 horses. Which one of the two gonna stop first? Which one gonna stop first? Gonna stop first. So we're changing the question in here. Stop first. The one that is gonna be pulled by the less number of horses. So the one that will stop first is the one that has less horses pulling. All right, so here I have the same exact load. The load here, in this case, is gonna be the cart itself. And yes, as Christina is saying, yeah, so the same cart, the same load, but here, each one of them will have, if you divide the weight of the carts that you're pulling on 8, so each one gonna have a higher load on. So they will get tired first. So the more muscle fibers here, I did recruit, the longer the duration of the contraction can be. All right, so again, more muscle fibers recruited, muscle fibers, faster contraction will take place and longer contraction will take place. All right? Makes sense? Somebody asked earlier, so why, if I'm not exercising, would I be forming lactic acid when I start to exercise? So first, I have a problem with the heart and lungs. So the heart is not contracting as an athlete, for example. My heart is not contracting as an athlete, so its ability to pump the blood is less efficient compared to an athlete. So I get less oxygen delivered, so I'm relying on anaerobic glycolysis. I'm breaking down the glucose without oxygen, and this results in accumulation of the lactic acid. This is one thing to look at. What happens when I start to exercise in a regular way? My heart will be working more efficiently. I have greater efficiency of my heart. It can pump larger amounts of blood, delivering much more oxygen to my muscles. This is one thing. This is what happens for the heart, but there will be other changes that will also be taking place in the muscle itself. So in the muscle, if I'm performing an aerobic exercise, so I run a marathon on a regular basis, what's going to happen? The muscle itself starts to build up more blood vessels inside. And the tiny blood vessels that are going to be embedded between your tissue cells, those are what we call the capillaries. So I increase the number of capillaries. You remember, in an aerobic exercise, I'm relying mainly on breaking down the glucose with or without oxygen. What do you think? In a low intensity exercise, in an aerobic exercise, I'm breaking down the glucose with or without oxygen. Aerobic exercise, am I breaking down the glucose with or without oxygen again? With oxygen. With oxygen. So, as a result of regular aerobic exercise, the muscle itself builds up more blood vessels. In order to do what? In order for me to deliver more oxygen to the muscle. More oxygen gets delivered, increases the ability of the muscle to break down the glucose. Also, inside the muscle cells, the muscle's gonna be forming much more mitochondria. If you remember, what is the mitochondria for? Mitochondria is the place for the production of ATP, and this is actually the place where this reaction takes place. You're going to be breaking down the glucose in the presence of oxygen inside the mitochondria. So what you're going to do, you're going to be building up more mitochondria in the muscle cells to break down the glucose, to break down in the presence of, again, oxygen. You're going to also be building up myoglobin. If you remember, what is the myoglobin in the muscles? This is similar to the hemoglobin. It has a very similar structure with many differences actually. What was the hemoglobin? The hemoglobin was the red pigment that was located in your red blood cells, and it's going to be responsible to carry the oxygen. Compared to the myoglobin, myoglobin is the red pigment. It's a red pigment also, but this time it's going to be kept in your muscle cells. And it's going to be also responsible to carry oxygen. So again, how my muscles respond to regular aerobic exercise or endurance exercise. It's going to be first increasing the number of capillaries inside the muscle cells, in between the muscle cells, in the muscle. It increases the number of mitochondria. This is where you're going to be breaking down the glucose in the presence of oxygen to release the ATP. And you're going to increase your reserves of oxygen. So what happens when you try to exercise again tomorrow after you have been exercising, after you run marathons over and over? Now, compared to 10 years ago, let's say, or 5 years ago, or even much less than this. Now, after you have been running marathons on a regular basis for the last 5 years, your muscles will have better endurance. What I mean by better endurance, they are less fatigable. You don't get tired as much as 5 years ago. Also, you're gonna have stronger contraction. The strength of the muscle gonna be increasing because you are capable to produce more ATP in a more efficient way, so you won't be accumulating lactic acid, so this prevents you from having muscle fatigue. Also, as you increase the number of ATPs that you are able to produce, rather than producing just 2 ATP, you're going to be producing 32 ATP. This increases the ability of the myofilaments inside your muscle cells to perform a contraction. So you're going to be developing a stronger muscle contraction. All right. What if I'm not performing an aerobic exercise? I am training mainly going to the gym to do weight lifting. I'm trying to increase the size of the muscles. So what is this type of training, resistant exercise, gonna result in? So first, it's not gonna be increasing the number of muscle fibers or muscle cells. You're gonna be increasing the size of the muscle cells, not the number of muscle cells. So you're still gonna have the same number of muscle cells, but what happens, each one of those muscle cells or muscle fibers gonna be increasing in size. So you're not increasing the number of muscle cells, you are increasing the size of each of them. Also, you're gonna be building up more mitochondria in your cells. You are building up more myosin, more actin, and you're gonna be accumulating much more connective tissue in your muscles around the muscle fibers. So if you have a bodybuilder and a marathon runner, which one has a stronger contraction of the leg muscles? Which one has a stronger contraction of the leg muscles? See, the leg muscles of the bodybuilder is going to be huge. They would be huge. Huge in size compared to a marathon runner they are much smaller in size. So which one has a stronger muscle contraction? What do you think? I've got only one response so far. Runner. Any other ideas? Bodybuilder, runner. Which one has a stronger contraction? Bodybuilder. What else? Bodybuilder. More fibers, so they will be performing stronger contraction. Bodybuilder. Yes, actually the bodybuilder has a stronger muscle contraction. But who can run faster? Who gets tired? Who can run on? Who doesn't get tired earlier? He can run for longer time, longer period. The runner. So runner can run faster and can run for longer time. Why is a runner? Because remember, the runner was performing an aerobic exercise. So he builds up blood vessels to get oxygen. He builds up mitochondria to break down the glucose in the presence of oxygen. He has stores of oxygen. So he's focusing on getting a lot of oxygen, and a lot of oxygen means a lot of ATP, and a lot of ATP means you won't get tired as before. Compared to a bodybuilder, yes, you're gonna have a stronger muscle contraction, but yes, those muscle contractions gonna rely mainly on your reserve. Rely mainly on your reserves. You can't perform a muscle contraction for a long time. It can't happen. You are much more fatigable. All right. It's like buying a fancy car using a credit card. I rely on the reserves. But here's a runner. He doesn't have this fancy car. He has much smaller muscle size. But he has good income that can sustain him for longer. Sustainability here is the key. But this bodybuilder, he just purchased a very fancy car on credit without having any idea how to pay it off. All right, so he's gonna get tired easier. In terms of finances here, same concept. I have a very strong, powerful muscle, a lot of muscle fibers, but at any time I've got any problem, I won't be able to provide the energy needed for those muscle fibers, for this huge number of muscle fibers in order for them to contract. So with any decline in the economy, I have no way to survive. If I have large debt like this. All right. Questions? Is the idea clear? Yeah, we all need to be runners. But it's actually nobody is purely a bodybuilder, nobody is purely a runner. So even bodybuilders will have aerobic exercises. Even a runner, he will need to perform resistance exercises. So everybody will need to combine both types of exercises to get the benefit of both of them. So you need to build up definitely much more muscle fibers, but also you need to provide your muscles with the different means that allows it to produce the energy needed for those fibers to contract. All right, good, good. Questions, questions? All right, so today I decided to change my life and I will be training my biceps as a first muscle today. So I am holding a pencil in my hand like this. This is a pencil, right? And I started my training. Flexion, extension, flexion, extension, flexion, extension. So what do you think gonna happen to my muscles? Would I be a bodybuilder one day? Would I have any increase in the size of my muscles? If I started today to work out holding a pencil in my hand like this, flexion, extension, would there be any increase in the size of my muscles? What do you think? Yes, no, 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 no. Why do you say no? Because you understand here the concept of overload principle. So if there is no overload to the muscle, here it's a very minimal load that my muscle can accommodate without having to increase its size. So without having an overload, something that is difficult for the muscle to perform, the muscle won't have an increase neither in the strength or the endurance. So we're discussing here how the muscles will be responding to aerobic exercise, to anaerobic exercises. But in both cases, in order for the muscle to have any gains, the muscle needs to be overloaded. If the muscles is not overloaded, there will be no further gain of the muscle. Your body will not increase the size of the muscle for you to look good. All right, so your body will not increase the size of your muscles for you to go to the beach, for example, right? Your body will increase the size of the muscles only when the muscles are overloaded. Yes, so Najib, if you are contracting for many reps, so you perform more contractions. So rather than having 10 reps, you're gonna be performing 1,000 reps of having a small load. This is still an overload. This is still an overload in this condition. This is still an overload. All right. This is still an overload, but it has its bad side because it also gonna be irritating the tendons of the muscles as more friction gonna be taking place. All right, but again, having 1,000 reps moving a light load, it's gonna be considered an overload. Yes, definitely. But again, if the muscle hasn't been overloaded, there will be no further gains. Why do I have an increase in the size? Why do I have an increase in the number of mitochondria present in the muscle cell, in the muscle cells? Why would I have an increase in the number of the myofilaments to adapt to the increased demands? So there will be no increase in the size, no increase in the reserves, just by not doing anything. So if you're sitting at home, you're not performing any kind of activities, there is no way that your muscles gonna be increasing in size. So again, the muscles need to be overloaded. Clear. Questions? All right, we can have a break for 10. We come back, discuss more about the muscles and the nervous system. All right, we'll see you in 10 minutes. All right, so double checking the sound. Can you still hear me? All right, great, great. All right, so modifications to how your course looks like now on Canvas. So I canceled the weekly view and I've created modules that contain all the files that you need from the files tab. So you're gonna have when you go to Canvas, you open home, the home page on Canvas, and you will see the quizzes. Again, all the quizzes have due date on April 27th. You will find another module that contains all the lecture PowerPoint slides that we are covering in our meetings. Those are the PowerPoint presentations for the different chapters. Some were asking about where can I find the muscles practice exam, which was part of the in-class activities in one of our previous meetings. You will find it under the lab activities files. So you have the PowerPoint presentations for the labs, as well as lists. For example, the muscles lists, those are the muscles which are required for you to know for this upcoming lab exam. Also, you have the PowerPoint presentations that we've been covering in our meeting. And you can find the practice exam, which is the final review for the muscles lab practical exam. All right, so this is where you can find the lab files. Also, you have the QBanks here. So I've created a module and I added all the QBanks. For those of you who were asking, how can we access the QBanks if we don't have the files tab anymore? So I've posted them on here for you on the home page on the course Canvas. For the lab exam, when will it be conducted? The lab exam is going to be conducted starting this Tuesday. The college has arranged with a company to provide you with an online proctoring, which I believe is going to be free of charge. We do have a meeting on Friday on when it will become live, so it's not available yet. They did reach an agreement with the company, but it's not available for me to conduct the test through yet. So this muscles lab exam is going to be available for you to complete on Canvas. It's not going to be proctored. It's going to be available for 1 week starting this Tuesday. So it's going to be available for 7 days. Tuesday starts this Tuesday, and it won't be available after that on the following Tuesday. I will be posting an announcement that has this information just for those who are worried right now. When would we be conducting the muscles lab exam? Again, it's going to be available for you to complete. You're going to have another module, and the other module going to have the modified lab exams. It's going to be at the on the home page as well, like in here. All right. The test format is going to be a single short answer where you're going to be picking the single best answer, like what we did with the bones. So exact date, let me double check my calendar on here. So it's gonna be available for you to take on April 7 until April 14th. It's gonna be available for you from April 7 to April 14th. It's gonna be timed. You're gonna have 1 minute per question. You're gonna have 50 questions. Each question is out of 2 points. So this gives you a total of 100 points. All right, so you're gonna have a list of choices for each of the markings. So for example, you're gonna have a marking showing the Gala Aponeratica, for example. No, there will be no extra credit on this exam. There will be no extra credit points on this exam. All right. So again, this upcoming muscle lab exam, I don't want to delay it more than this. So in order to get everything done before the end of the semester, we're gonna start. You will have access to it before they finalize their agreement with the proctoring platform. Any questions? Any questions? So all the remaining quizzes are due on the 27th, but you don't have to wait until the 27th to complete the quiz. For the lecture exams, this is a good question. For the lecture exams also, I will be postponing their due dates to be on the 27th. They will be available for you to complete starting from today until the 27th. None of the lecture exams is going to be proctored. None of the quizzes is going to be proctored. The only two that will be proctored are going to be the final exam and the nervous system lab exam. So nervous system lab exam, and which is our lab exam 4. This is the only one that's going to be proctored along with the final exam, which is going to be optional. The assignments are the quizzes, the in-class activities, and the exam. So I don't understand the question. So let me write down what you need to complete for this course, what still haven't been completed yet. So you do have 2 lecture exams. You do have 2 lab exams. You have the chapter quizzes. You have, as also starting from chapter 9 to chapter 16. Those are the ones that you did not complete. And you have the visible body lab assignments, you have the in-class activities, you have the final review assignment, and you have the optional final exam. In order for me to give a chance to everybody to complete at your own pace, lecture exams are going to be due on the 27th. The chapter quizzes are going to be due on the 27th. They are available for you to complete anytime until the 27th. Visible body lab assignments are also going to be due at the end of the semester. I believe it's on the 27th as well, or 26th. So they have been available for you throughout the semester until the end of the semester. So you can go and complete them anytime. In-class activities, those are going to be related to our meetings. You're going to be completing them in a timely manner, but you're going to be submitting them in one file on the 27th. This is not something specific that you're going to be completing on the 27th. This is something that you're going to be completing throughout the semester and submitting on the 27th or earlier. Final review assignments. This is a file that I will tell you about in the last week that you're going to be completing. This is worth 30 points towards your final course grade. We've got 2 more lab exams. We have one which is not going to be proctored, which is the muscles lab exam, and one that's going to be proctored. The time for this test is not determined yet. All right, I have to know the information from the college, and there is no information available yet on how the new proctoring platform gonna be working, when it's gonna be available. I have no such information. And this is why we're gonna be conducting the muscles lab exam without being proctored. Final exam is gonna be hopefully proctored. And again, the time is not determined yet. So this is what you still have to complete. Again, lecture exams are going to be available for you for starting today until the 27th. So whenever you are ready with the chapter, whether you're following my classes or not, you can complete them. They won't be available after the 27th. Chapter 2 quiz, it's not, let me double check it. All right, so chapter 2 quiz, it should be also added in here. Chapter 2 quiz, I will add this for you. Thank you for letting me know. Is this clear, Nico? Any questions? Any questions? I know it's a mess right now, but we're trying to get everything done in the best available way. So for the timing of the exam, you're gonna have 60 minutes actually, 60 minutes for 50 questions. And this is going to be providing you with more than a minute per question. All right, I will be taking the test. I will be taking the test myself. And I will double the time that I will take if I take less than 30 minutes to complete the test. This is how I calculate the time for the test. If I take less than 30 minutes, you're gonna have 60 minutes to complete the exam. So double the time I will be taking to complete it. All right, if I take anything more than 30 minutes, I will still double the time that I will be taking. So if I take less than 30 minutes, it's gonna be 60 minutes, double the time. If I take more than 30 minutes, you're gonna have double the time I will be taking to complete the test. All right, I might add also to this like an extra 10 minutes for review. All right, this is how I usually calculate the time for you to complete the test. All right, that's why the exam is not ready yet. I need to make sure everything is clear enough for you to complete. The time will be more than enough for you to complete. All right. Any questions? Any questions? Any issues with this arrangement on here? Anything which is not working for you? Please let me know if you have any issues for us to not be faced with problems towards the end of the semester. But again, do not wait. Do not wait until the due date, because simply I did postpone everything to the latest date possible. I know you might have a problem with the internet, you might have a problem with whatever thing. That's why I have postponed everything till the last day. There is no way you can complete everything. You should be holding responsibility here to complete this in a timely manner. Do not wait until the end of the semester to get those completed. The final review assignments, this is something that I will be discussing with you at the end of the semester. So 1 week before the end of the semester. All right, because if I mentioned everything right now, this might get a lot of people confused. All right, I don't want to overload you with more information, but you need to complete those in a timely manner. So whenever we finish a chapter, please get the quiz done. Please get the lecture exams done at your own pace. I don't want to rush anybody. All right. Any questions? Any questions? All right, great. All right, so we're looking here at smooth muscles. So we've seen all what we've been discussing so far in the chapter are skeletal muscles. All what we've been discussing are skeletal muscles. So now we're looking at the smooth muscles. How smooth muscles are going to be different from skeletal muscles. If you remember, in terms of histological structure of smooth muscles are spindle-shaped muscles which have a single nucleus, so each cell has only one nucleus, unlike the skeletal muscles, they were multi-nucleated. And if you remember, smooth muscles do not have any striations, unlike the skeletal muscles and the cardiac muscle cells, they were striated. If you remember, smooth muscles were located in the wall of hollow organs, except for the heart, which has cardiac muscles instead. The general rule for the arrangement of the smooth muscles in the hollow organs, if I'm dealing with a tube, and this is going to be the case in most of the organs where you're going to have smooth muscles, you're going to have two layers of smooth muscle cells, an outer longitudinal muscle layer and an inner circular muscle layer. So again, outside, you're going to have longitudinal muscle layer. Inside, you're going to have circular muscle layer. So how is the circular muscle layer going to be contracting? It constricts. Reducing the diameter, like this. Compared to the longitudinal muscle layer, when you contract and relax, this allows peristaltic movement in the wall of the organ. So if we're looking at small intestines, for example, the small intestines will have the ability to constrict, contracting the circular muscle cells, and it has the ability to allow the propulsion of the food along its length by performing the peristalsis, which is allowed by the contraction and the relaxation of the longitudinal muscle layer. So again, which one is located outside? Longitudinal. Which one is located on the inside? Is going to be my circular muscle layer. So again, outside layer is my longitudinal muscle layer. Inside layer is my circular muscle layer. This is the general rule. You're gonna be, when you study the gastrointestinal tract, for example, later on, if you're taking AP2, you're gonna learn that you do have many exceptions for this general rule. All right, but generally speaking, outer longitudinal, inner circular muscle layer. And it makes perfect sense. So if I did have the circular muscle layer on the outside and the longitudinal muscle layer on the inside, and I'm contracting them all day and night, so what's going to happen? I will be applying a lot of stress on the longitudinal muscle layer when the circular muscle layer contracts. All right. So again, what is the general arrangement of the muscle layers? General arrangement, I am formed of an outer longitudinal and an inner circular muscle layer. Outer longitudinal, inner circular muscle layer. So how is the smooth muscle cells going to be contracting? Remember, what was the protein subunit to which the calcium was binding to, what was the name of the regulatory protein subunit that allowed the contraction of the skeletal muscle to take place? Do you remember? Any other answer? We got troponin. We got troponin from Najib. Any other idea? Troponin. If you remember, in order for you to contract your skeletal muscles, you did release lots of calcium out in the cytoplasm, and this calcium was binding to a regulatory protein subunit, which is the troponin. So once it binds to the troponin, remember, you're going to be moving away the tropomyosin, and this exposes the binding sites on the actin subunits. And this is what allows the myosin heads to bind to the actin subunits, forming those cross bridges, which will allow the myosin to pull the actin along its length. So allows the thick filaments to pull the thin filaments along its length, resulting in a reduction in the length of my muscle. Yes, calcium binds to the troponin. Calcium binds to the troponin. And when it binds to the troponin, it's going to be moving away the tropomyosin. All right. Does this answer your question, Najib? All right, great. So in the smooth muscles, we don't have the troponin, but we do have an essential role for the calcium in terms of muscle contraction. But calcium here doesn't bind to the troponin, it binds to another regulatory protein. This is called my calmodulin. What is the calmodulin? Calmodulin is going to be here. The regulatory protein subunit that corresponds to the troponin in the skeletal muscles. Do you remember what neurotransmitter were you using to allow the skeletal muscle contraction? What was the name of the neurotransmitter that you were releasing from the terminal end of the neurons for it to bind to its receptor on the muscle side? Acetylcholine, exactly, acetylcholine. So this was the only neurotransmitter for the skeletal muscles on here for you to initiate the contraction. But for the smooth muscles, you do have two neurotransmitters, acetylcholine and the norepinephrine. We've got two different types of neurotransmitters. We've got the acetylcholine, we've got the norepinephrine. Smooth muscles are responding not only to the nervous system, but they are also responding to the endocrine system. So the endocrine system also going to be enhancing the contraction or reducing the contraction of smooth muscles. If you do remember, in our very first meetings, We did mention that from a gland pending down from the brain, you're gonna be releasing a hormone called oxytocin during labor. And oxytocin, if you remember, was enhancing the uterine contractions. So what kind of muscles do we have in the uterus, in the wall of the uterus? Smooth muscles. It's a hollow organ, it has a cavity inside, and it's not the heart. So who did enhance the contraction here? It's not a neurotransmitter released from a nerve cell. It's a hormone that did reach the uterus through the blood. So I'm not only responding to the nervous system, I'm also responding to hormones, to the endocrine system. Which is not a factor that enhances force of contraction? Can you remind me? Which of the following is not increasing the force of contraction? Is not enhancing the force of contraction? Recruitment, frequency of stimulation, size of the muscle fiber, or all of the above are going to be stimulating the force of contraction, enhancing the force of contraction. So can you remind me what's recruitment? This is determined by the strength of the stimulus. Stronger stimulation means more activation of muscle fibers. The number of muscle fibers here that get activated, we say those are the recruited muscle fibers. And remember, more muscle fibers that will be recruited, stronger contraction. Frequency of stimulation. Remember, faster stimulation results in what? I'm preventing the muscle fiber from completing its relaxation phase. This results in a stronger muscle contraction. Remember, size of the muscle fiber, smaller muscle fibers will create weaker contractions compared to medium-sized muscle fibers compared to large muscle fibers. So the larger the muscle fiber, the stronger the contraction it's going to be able to perform. We classify the smooth muscles into two different types. We've got single unit smooth muscles and multi-unit smooth muscle. What is the difference? Generally speaking, single unit smooth muscles are acting as the cardiac muscles. You're either gonna be contracting all the muscles or relaxing all the muscles. Like what? Here again, like my cardiac muscle cells. This is single unit. Compared to multi-unit smooth muscle, it's gonna be acting like a skeletal muscle. It doesn't have an all or none contraction, it has a graded contraction. What this means? Single unit behaves like the heart. So whenever one cell gets activated, you need to send out the signal to all the muscle cells located at the same site. Like where? Like, for example, in your gastrointestinal tract. That's why we have another name for single unit smooth muscles, visceral smooth muscles. So try to imagine here, this is this part of the large or small intestine. This part did contract like this. And this part, this segment, did not contract. What's going to happen? So this segment contracted, pushing the intestines forward, but the following segment did not contract. What's going to happen? What do you think? Is there something wrong with this? No? Yeah, we are looking at the wall of the intestine. This part did contract, pushing forward, but the following segment is not contracting. Is there something wrong? It is, exactly. So I will have intussusception or intestinal block. So this part that was contracting is going to be passing to the inside of the segment that failed to contract. Like this, causing blockage of the intestines. So you don't want to have contraction of one part which is not going to be followed by a contraction in the rest of the intestines. You need the signal that enhances the muscles to contract to travel to all smooth muscles located in the intestine for them to create a rhythmic contraction. I have a certain rhythm. I have a wave of the contraction. And this wave won't be created unless you're going to be conducting the signal to every single muscle cell. So they act as one unit for you to not have a problem. Same for the heart. Do you want this part of the heart to contract and then to be followed by this part and then to be followed by this part and then this part, or you want all the different parts of the heart to contract all of the same in the same time for you to exert enough force to pump the blood? Which one do you pick? Contract all of them in the same time or contract them separately? What do you think? Which one is going to be more logical to perform? Enhance every single cardiac muscle cell to contract, for all of them to contract in the same exact time, or contract part, then another part, then another part. I have a delay in the electrical conduction. All of them in the same time. All of them in the same time, exactly. So here, this is the same concept in the single unit smooth muscles. You need all the smooth muscles to receive the signal all in the same time. And if you remember, back when we studied the cells, I do have a type of cell junctions that allows free communication between the adjacent cells. They were formed of protein channels to allow the signal to travel freely between the cells. If you remember, what did we call those cell junctions that will allow the free movement of the signal? Gap junctions, exactly. So here, single unit smooth muscles have gap junctions in between, which will allow the signal to travel freely, causing the excitation of all the smooth muscles. They act as, again, one unit. You can't contract part and leave another part without contracting. All right, this is single unit smooth muscles. Another name for it is going to be my visceral smooth muscles. Compared to the multi-unit smooth muscles, those are going to be performing the same way like a skeletal muscle. So for the skeletal muscle, remember, you don't have to activate all the muscle fibers every time you contract your muscle. Remember, not every time you contract your skeletal muscle, you're going to be activating all the muscle fibers within this muscle. So for example, if I'm contracting my biceps to perform flexion of my forearm while I'm holding a pencil, it's going to require me to only recruit few muscle fibers. But if I'm trying to hold chair, I will be recruiting much more muscle fibers. So you see on here, it doesn't have to recruit all the muscle fibers. The number of recruited muscle fibers gonna be determined according to how heavy is the load. So I don't have an all or none contraction, whether you contract all the cells or you relax all the cells. You're gonna be creating a graded contraction in the skeletal muscles. According to what? According to the loads that you're trying to carry. You can contract, can perform this degree of tension, you can increase it. You can increase it according to what? According to number of recruited muscle fibers, according to the frequency of stimulation, according to the strength of the stimulus, according to the size of the muscle fiber. All this is going to be creating different grades for the skeletal muscle to contract. So this is the same concept here when we're dealing with multi-unit smooth muscles. It's not all or none like the heart. So you're going to be trying hard. So you're going to be, for example, so for Christina, so how would I know the number of muscle fibers I should be recruiting? You don't know before you hold the load. So as you're holding the load, remember what happens? You're going to be increasing the tension. When you increase the tension, what is going on inside your muscle? You're going to be increasing the number of recruited muscle fibers. So I started by recruiting 2 fibers. The load didn't move. Then I will increase the number of muscle fibers that I'm recruiting. Now 10 fibers. I was not able to create enough tension within my muscle to carry the load. So I will recruit more fibers and more fibers and more fibers until I get enough tension in my muscle that allows me to move this load. And I will keep it constant. Remember, this is what we've called an isotonic contraction. All right, so you don't determine the number of muscle fibers that you're going to be using before you start holding the load. As you are carrying the load, you're going to be increasing the number of recruited muscle fibers according to your need. Did this answer your question, Christina? If you lift weights and build fibers, but then stop, do you retain all the fibers that have been created? The muscle fiber, what we call a muscle fiber, is muscle cells. So when you exercise, you do not create muscle fibers. You create myofibrils. you create myosin, you create actin filaments inside the muscle fiber. A muscle fiber is a muscle cell. Another name for this cell is muscle fiber. You do not increase the number of fibers, but you increase the size of the fiber. And as I stop exercising the muscle, what's going to happen? You have proteins that you're not using inside, and if you don't use this protein, it's going to be better for you to transform it into energy, for you to use in the metabolic activities of the brain, for example. So your body will find that this is an unused protein. You're not using the muscle anymore. So why am I keeping this energy without being used? So what will I do? I will be breaking it down and transform it into energy if I need, transform it into fat even. So those myofilaments inside the protein subunits, the myosin and actin, if you're not using the muscle anymore, yes, they will definitely be broken down. If you remember last class, we mentioned if you don't use it, you lose it. Does this clarify the idea? All right, great. All right, so back to the smooth muscle again. Smooth muscle either is going to be a single unit or multi-unit. Single unit, you need to send out the signal to all the muscles located in the organ for you to create a rhythmic pattern of contraction. Compared to a multi-unit, you are not enhancing, it's not essential for all the muscle cells to contract all at the same time. You won't be contracting all the muscle cells located in the organ, but you're going to be contracting only some of them according to your needs. So it's not all or none, it's a graded muscle contraction. All right. Like what? Like, for example, the blood vessel. If this is my blood vessel, inside you've got the blood flowing in a lamellar pattern like this. So as you have blood flowing in your arches, this blood is going to be pushing the wall of the artery out, creating the blood pressure. All right, so if I have too much blood pressure, so what will I do? I will ask you the question, the same question, but in a different way. This is your yard, your front yard, in front of your house. You have a water hose. And you're watering your yard. But the water is not reaching all the way to those peripheral parts of the yard. So what do you want to do for this water hose? Increase the pressure. You want to increase the pressure. How would I increase the pressure of the water flowing out for the water to travel further? You're going to be compressing with your finger the end of the hose. You're going to be pressing the end of the hose. So what happens to the diameter as a result of this water hose? You're going to be reducing its diameter. So when you reduce the diameter, what's going to happen to the flow, either of the water in this example or of the blood? So when I constrict the blood vessel, what's going to happen to the pressure of the blood traveling through the vessel? The pressure will be increased. So if I am compressing the end of the hose, what happens to the water flow? The water travels further. But if you did apply too much pressure, let's say, so now the water is traveling all the way outside of your yard. You did get the water out from the other side. Is this something good? You're not watering your yard anymore. You're getting the water out. So what you're going to need to do is you need to reduce the constrictions that you are performing. I need to reduce the constriction here I'm applying on the end of the hose. So you see on here, this tells you what? This tells me that it's not either you constrict or not. You have many levels of the constriction. It's not an on and off. It's not on and off. You have multiple levels of the constriction that you can perform. The degree of constrictions that you're going to need to perform, it's going to be determined according to your needs. So if you did have a larger yard for the water to travel to all the different parts of the yard, you're going to need to apply much more constriction. If you have a smaller yard, you're going to have to apply much less constriction, and so on. So it's not either you constrict or you dilate. You have many levels of the constriction, many levels of the dilation that will be determined according to what you actually need. That's why it's a multi-unit. It's a graded contraction. It's not all or none. It's not essentially important. It's not important, but and also it's going to be harmful if you did decide to contract every time all the smooth muscle cells in the wall of the vessel. If you every time you decided to contract the smooth muscles in the wall of the vessel, this is going to be increasing the blood pressure dramatically. And if you decided to relax all of them, this is going to be dropping your blood pressure dramatically. So you need to keep something in between. You need to not relax, not contract all of them. You need to monitor the degree of constriction and regulate the degree of constriction according to the changes that are taking place in your blood pressure. All right. You don't want to have too high pressure. You don't want to have low blood pressure. Neither is good for you. Same concept with my airflow. So if this is your trachea like this is your airways, bronchi, bronchioles, and this is your lung. In the wall of the bronchi, you're going to have smooth muscles. Do you want to constrict all of them? Do you want to dilate all of them? Which one do you think? Do you want to constrict all of the muscles in the airways or dilate all of the muscles of the airways? Neither. Exactly. You neither want to contract all the muscles or dilate all the muscles in the airways. You need to regulate the diameter to allow enough air to flow into your lungs. Not too much, not too little. Same for the iris of the eye. is this is your eye like this. Let's say you have blue eyes. At the center of the iris, you have the pupil, which is this dark spot in the middle. What is the function here of the iris is to regulate the amount of light that travels into your eye. I'm regulating the amount of light that travels in. So if you got exposed to very bright light, what you're gonna do, you're gonna be constricting the pupil. How about in a night time? You have very low light. You need to capture all the light you're able to get. So what you're gonna do, you're gonna be dilating your pupil of the eye to allow more light to pass into your eye. What if I am sitting in a room in a moderate amount of light? Would I constrict or would I dilate the iris? What do you think? Would you fully dilate the iris or you fully constrict the iris if you are exposed to a moderate amount of light? It's not too bright, it's not dark even. Something in between. Something in between, exactly. It's not all or none again. It's not all or none. It's gonna be something in between the two. You need to allow enough light. So it's not gonna be fully dilated or fully constricted. It's gonna be dilated, but not fully dilated. All right, what allowed you to do so is that the smooth muscles present in the iris of the eye are of what type again? They are multi-unit smooth muscles. Is this concept clear? Is this clear? All right, so let me pull a question here for you for the in-class activity for today. All right, so a quick review of the muscles going to be helpful at this point. So please name a muscle that allows the following actions. First one is abduction of the arm. Second is elevation of the shoulder. Third action abduction of the thigh, or let's say abduction here. Adduction of the thigh. Or let's say abduction of the wrist joint of the hand or wrist. Dorsiflexion of the foot. Flexion of the spine. Extension of the arm. Extension of the neck. And finally, it's going to be pronation. This is also a type of questions that you might have. To name the muscle, I might be providing you with an action, and I ask you I will ask you to pick the correct muscle. So for example, I will give you a list of actions, I will give you a list of muscles, and you pick the suitable muscle you match them together. All right, so most of the exam again is going to be in the form of diagrams where you're going to be identifying the muscles, mentioning their actions and attachments, like what you have in the muscles review assignment. Another way I can address the question for you is going to be in this format, what I can provide you with actions and ask you to tell me which of the provided muscles is going to be performing this action or that action. All right, any questions? Any of those questions is not clear on the board? So you can answer them right now, but again, just write them down on a Word document and keep them ready for you to put them all together. If you're not sure of any of them, you can either ask me now or ask me at the beginning of next class.